Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the SNS Cricket Diaries. I'm recording this just a few minutes after India has completed a fantastic Champions Trophy win. We are the winners of the Champions Trophy yet another time. So congratulations to all the Indian cricket fans out there and everyone who follows Indian cricket. But I'm recording this very special episode with a very special person, a person whom I have followed from the time when I started watching cricket all the way back in the mid 90s. A voice that has endorsed South African cricket, that has resonated with South African cricket for many years and international cricket as well. A voice it's very endearing to the ears. And I have with me Mr. Trevor Quirk. Thank you so much, Mr. Quirk, for joining in once again on my cricket channel.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you once again, Siddharth.
So for people of a different ilk who may not quite know who is Mr. Quirk, let me tell you that if you go on to the YouTube channel and watch the South African Cricket Tour of India in 1996, you would hear Mr. Quirk commentating on many of the matches that happened, the Titan Cup Tri Series, as well as the Test series in which. In a very dramatic fashion, Mr. Quirk would probably remember when he was on air when Javagal Srinath, the former Indian fast medium bowler, picked up 6 wickets when India were defending a target of only 170 in the fourth innings, and when I think it was Andrew Hudson and Darrell Cullinan who got out without a run on the board. I still clearly remember vividly those words of Mr. Quirk saying that both the batters are out without a run on the board. Mr. Quirk, whenever I go back and watch those clips on the YouTube and I hear your voice, I fondly remember those times, and I fondly remember the last interview I did with you, which in fact many of my viewers have commented on many of the clips of that particular video when you've talked about various aspects of South African cricket and international cricket. So thank you so much once again for being here.
Oh, absolute pleasure. And those were wonderful days, wonderful memories, I must say. And you know, that whole tour was a memorable occasion, of course. And there were so many highlights and some lowlights, but it was an amazing experience altogether.
Yeah, in fact, just yesterday, Mr. Quirk, I was also watching some highlights of the South African cricket tour of Pakistan, where, if you remember, Pat Simcox made a century, or maybe didn't make a century probably, but had a very huge stand with Kirsten, and South Africa went on to win, I guess, one of the tests over there. This was, I'm talking about, somewhere in 1997, 98. So I did hear your voice over there as well. So it was wonderful to hear you again. Um, Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Quirk. So, as I said, we're recording this just a few minutes after India has won the Champions Trophy. So, Mr. Quirk, what would you like to tell about the Indian team's victory and the Champions Trophy as a whole?
Well, first of all, congratulations to India. They are a fantastic side. They bat with such depth. They've got the spin bowlers, which is needed, I think, in both Pakistan and in Dubai. And of course, they played all their matches in Dubai. But even without Bumrah, who I regard as arguably the best fast bowler in the world, they were able to win the Champions Trophy. And I must say, commiserations to New Zealand. They've become a very good cricket side. And there were moments today when I thought, oh my goodness, India might even get beaten here. But they pulled through as they often do. And the whole tournament has been interesting and exciting. Um, there's been a lot of criticism, obviously, because you know, India have been in one place in Dubai, um, playing on one sort of wicket with the same practice facilities and staying in a hotel where, they could come and go as they like and it wasn't very far from the ground.
Mhm.
Whereas all the other teams were moving from Karachi to Rawalpindi to Lahore, and to Dubai whenever they had to play India. And also, the players were restricted to their hotels because of the security. They weren't allowed to leave their hotels. Now, I can understand this security problem in Pakistan. And, from that point of view, I can understand why India not want to go and play in Pakistan. But the big question to me then is, why did they award the Champions Trophy tournament to Pakistan, knowing that there would be these problems? And, a ridiculous example of some of the problems was that South Africa actually had to fly last Sunday to Dubai in case they had to play India in the semi-final, which would have meant they were there. But as it turned out, they had to play New Zealand in the semi-final. So they went all the way to Dubai, turned around, went all the way back to Lahore for nothing. And, that's a sort of crazy situation, I think. And a lot of people saying, that is unfair. So, but I understand also, you see that, world cricket is really run in many ways by India, Australia, and England. And yes, uh, they had to have it and make it happen that way. But as I say, I question the fact that why then did you award the tournament to Pakistan given those circumstances?
Yeah, fair enough. There has been a lot of criticism of the ICC and BCCI for this whole arrangement that happened. But I guess ICC was left with very few alternatives once they awarded this tournament to Pakistan. So I think, yeah, your point is fair enough. On the question should be, why in the first place was the tournament awarded to Pakistan? And it was not as if it was done about 10, 15 years ago. This was awarded just about, I guess, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when the situation still was very delicate between India and Pakistan, and it has been there for a long time. So yeah, I think, fair enough your point, but I guess the Indian team would also probably say that still they had to struggle a lot, and we saw today as well that a lot of wickets fell in the middle, but a good partnership between, I think, it was Shreyas Iyer and KL Rahul, and then Hardik Pandya also chipped in. So a wonderful victory for the Indian team, a fantastic win. I think every Indian should be proud of it. So, Mr. Quirk, sort of taking the focus away from the Indian team's victory to the actual theme of the day, that is to talk about South African cricket with you, because there are, actually speaking, very few people who have the kind of authority to speak on South African cricket the way you do. So, a quick impression, a quick take on South Africa's performance in the Champions Trophy. I mean, once again, they made it to the semi-finals, but then the disappointing thing was that they just didn't perform to their potential. So another tournament that has gone by. Is there any positive that you take out of the South African cricket team's performance in this tournament?
Well, the only thing I can say is that the only um, ICC World Trophy that we've ever won, which is ridiculous given the fact that South Africa is a major cricket nation. And that was the Champions Trophy in 1998 when we beat the West Indies. And since then, the cupboard is entirely bare, which is an indictment of South African cricket. And it's why we have been labeled with this choking, um, comparison, which is fair or unfair. The players don't like it, of course. But the fact goes on that we keep getting there to semi-finals or whatever, and then we lose them. And in this particular Champions Trophy, we played some good cricket, but on the Pakistani wickets and indeed on the wicket in Dubai, we don't have the spinners that are required, top class spinners. We have Maharaj, yes, he's a decent spinner, but we don't have other spinners that are world class, like India have, and Pakistani have, and all that sort of thing. So it is a major problem, and even New Zealand, they've got Satna, they've got Ravindra, and they've done very, very well. Their batting, I think, has held them together because they've got a wonderful batting side. But then again, as I said earlier, India, you've got Jadeja coming in at number 8. I mean, he's a hell of a good player. And so, India, I think we're always going to be, and I feared that if we had beaten New Zealand in the semi-final in Lahore, we would have had to go and play India in Dubai, and I wouldn't have given us much chance in being able to beat them because they are a good side, and South Africa keep sort of disappointing. When they get to semi-finals and things, and then they lose. And I know we rely too much, I think, on our fast bowlers, and so when you on pitches that don't really suit fast bowlers, the likes of Rabada and those sort of guys are in many ways negated. Um, so it is a problem, and also we don't have the experience batting on those sort of pitches as much as we like. So, yeah, a disappointing tournament again for us. But I suppose they'll come away and say, well, at least we did get to the semi-final.
I think what you point out is important, Mr. Quirk, because uh, when we talk about recent events in ICC South Africa, since they made the 2015 semi-final of the World Cup, they crashed out in successive ICC tournaments during the group stage. So I'm talking about the 2016 T20 World Cup, the 2021 T20 World Cup, the 2019 ODI World Cup, even the 2022 T20 World Cup when they famously lost to the Netherlands, and that paved the way for Pakistan to go through. So considering that, the fact that they have made it to two semi-finals of ODI events, the World Cup of 2023 and this year's Champions Trophy, as well as the final of last year's T20 World Cup, that definitely is some sort of an improvement on recent years. And I guess the fact that when I was growing up and we used to see South Africa continuously making it to the semi-finals, I think that there was a bit of a dip, but then they've again come back stronger, and they are into the final of the World Test Championship as well, about which we will talk in detail. So I guess yes, you can say that South Africa should feel happy, but the fact that you talked about the choker stack, but in this particular semi-final, the choker stack shouldn't even apply to them because they never came anywhere close to competing against New Zealand. And the moment New Zealand made 362, it was like they had given up. I mean, the body language of their batters just didn't look as if they would be able to chase, although they have a strong batting lineup. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, our batting lineup basically is pretty good. But sometimes I think when they're playing on pitches that don't suit them that much and are conducive to spin bowling, they're not that good because they don't experience those circumstances that often. And certainly not in South Africa, where the pitches are all fast bowler friendly. So, it is a big problem. And although some of them have got a lot of experience because they play in the IPL and, and the Big Bash and, all sorts of things like that, I still think that, when we under pressure and we've got to chase a total of significance, um, we don't just get there. It's better if we do win the toss and bat first, then we, can set a target under less pressure. So yeah, it's just a problem with South African cricket. I don't think we're quite there in terms of where we want to be and where we should be. But there are some good signs. There's some young players coming through, and hopefully things will just get better. And the fact that we've qualified for the World Test Championship final at Lords in June is quite amazing, really.
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of controversy around that.
Yeah, and we'll certainly talk about that. But Mr. Quirk, just hanging on to that semi-final, it was a curious innings by David Miller. I mean, when you're chasing that kind of total against a good bowling attack, yes, wickets did fall around him, especially when he came, and then around him as well. But it was like he just pulled the shutters down on the chase, and then in the last 40-50 runs that he just belted all the New Zealand bowlers around. It was just as if he was trying to get to his 100. It felt like a very selfish innings by David Miller. What is your take on his curious innings in the semi final?
Yeah, again, I think the problem is that we, unlike India, for instance, we have a fairly long tail. So, our batting stops at around about 7 uh, at the best. And I think that the top batsmen are nervous of losing wickets and then exposing that long tail of ours. And so they are more cautious necessarily than they should be, for instance. Like today, Hardik Pandya came in and he played with freedom because
Hmm.
he knew that there were still very qualified batsmen to come. Now, our guys can't do that. They've got to be conscious of that we daren't lose too many wickets. Otherwise, we're just going to fold anyway. So it's a fine line, a balance that is hard to get to. And, if the top guys don't really crack it, then there's a lot of pressure and the lower the Clarsons of this world coming and the David Millers feel that pressure that they daren't get out because then they expose the tail. So that is a big South African problem. We do not have the all rounders that we used to have. When we had people like Sean Pollock coming in at number 7, who scored 4 Test 100s, that sort of thing. We don't have those all rounders, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you had Sean Pollock, Lance Klusner, Brian McMillan, so many great. I mean, even Nicky Boye.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a couple of ODI hundreds to his name. So yeah, I mean that was a totally different era of cricket that we're talking about, Mr. Quirk. So yeah, I mean, so the Champions Trophy is done and dusted. South Africa, a disappointing performance, but I really hope that they are not too far away from a title. The fact that they reached the final of the T20 World Cup last year, they are into the final of the World Test Championship. So maybe an ICC tournament is not an ICC trophy is not too far away for them. Um, Now shifting focus to the test format, Mr. Quirk, we just talked about the fact that they've reached the WTC final in some amazing circumstances. And just to let our viewers know why Mr. Quirk sort of thinks like that, and even I do, is that South Africa, the vagaries and the un the unsymmetrical nature of Test cricket has sort of made this way for South Africa in a way that they played only 2 Test series throughout this particular WTC cycle. They did not even send their strongest team to New Zealand, and hence they lost 2-0. So, in fact, this particular cycle in which they have actually made it to the final includes a 2-0 loss to New Zealand. But they have played some consistent cricket, and even their coach, um, I think I'm forgetting his name, the
Shukri
test coach.
Conrad.
Yeah, yeah. Mr.
Shukri Conrad.
Mr. Shukri Conrad, yeah, he was very unapologetic when he was asked by the media as to, do you think that South Africa have got the right side of the draw, in the sense that they have had to play against lesser opponents and much lesser number of tests as compared to, say, India or Australia or England, and he was very unapologetic. And he said that I don't care, the way we have reached, that's how it has been, and that's how we've reached. So, firstly, Mr. Quirk, what do you have to say about the South African performance in this particular WTC cycle?
Yeah, well, the test matches that we've had to play, We've done very well other than that two-match test series in New Zealand. And that was a complete and utter disaster. And there I lay the blame completely on Cricket South Africa. Cricket South Africa have a problem in that financially they are not very strong. And as a result of that, when they sign contracts with the top players, they do not specify that you have to, first and foremost, play for your country when required. And this is because they cannot compensate the players if they're losing out on playing, in some T20 international tournament like the IPL or the Big Bash or whatever it is. And so a lot of our players go and play in those tournaments. And at the same time, we have to go and play a test series against New Zealand in New Zealand. And we sent an absolute C team, as it were, third-rate team. And it was a great disappointment and upset, but I blame the fact that this is a problem with Cricket South Africa, that they are not managing themselves properly. And as a result of it, this is going on all the time. And even in T20, I mean, the other day we were in the West Indies, playing against the West Indies in a limited over series, and we were getting beaten by the West Indies when at the same time there were three top of players of ours playing for the Barbados Royals. And Claessens, for instance, who's our best T20 batsman, he was playing for St. Kitts. Now, that is absurd that while our national team is playing in the West Indies, the top players are not playing for the national team. They're playing in the West Indies, the Caribbean Premier League.
Premier League. Yeah.
So it's an absurd situation. And we're lucky, as a result of that defeat in New Zealand in those test matches, to have actually made it through to the Test Championship final. And that is because we played weaker opposition in there. We did not, as you said, play against India much, or England or Australia, the top three teams. And in that respect, I blame the ICC. They draw up the test schedule, not South Africa. And the fact that we only played about 12, 13 test matches, and Australia, India, England, they played 20, like 8 more than us. So it's not our fault that we had lesser opposition that we beat, and we have now ended up in the final. And I know there's been huge criticism from somebody like Michael Vaughan from England, of course, saying this is ridiculous. How can South Africa? It's their fault. It's not South Africa's fault. We would want to play India, England, Australia, the top sides, a lot more in Test cricket. And hopefully this will teach them a lesson that, don't do this to us again, because what happens then, you will lose out on playing in the final. I mean, imagine India not playing in this World Test Championship final. It's crazy. And here we are now against Australia in the final. And, the world is up in arms about it. The Australians have been complaining. India, it's not our fault. You laid out the test schedule, and we just eventually won enough matches to get through to that final.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right, Mr. Quirk. There is this growing sense of discontentment, especially amongst some of the South African and English former players and cricket pundits as to how South Africa has made it through to the final. But I guess you play the team that you are dealt with, and South African team has done pretty well. They defeated Bangladesh in Bangladesh, which I think could have been tricky. And then against Sri Lanka and Pakistan in South Africa, Pakistan especially gave them a tough time. They should have won that first test match. But South Africa ultimately did enough to be able to deservedly be in the WTC final. So, how do you see the South African Test team, Mr. Quirk, in these last 2 years? Or maybe if you can go take us back a little bit further, but especially since we're talking about the current WTC cycle. So, how do you see the makeup of the South African Test team, and what is the potential for this particular team going ahead?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. Just 2 weeks ago, I did a question and answer with Shukri Conrad, where I was asking him a question. And he was very articulate and erudite. And I posed these awkward questions to him. And between us, we came to, as I say, the conclusion that, our test team could even be better than it is. But again, um, a lot of the top class players, like Heinrich Claessens, I mean, Heinrich Claessens is a world class player. So is David Miller. And the two of them should be playing in our test side, but they're not because Cricket South Africa can't compensate them when they lose out on playing where they are in huge demand in the T20 international tournaments, which flourished around the world. So those are the sort of problems that we sit with. Otherwise, we could be a much more potent side. As it is, we're a reasonable side, especially, and you referred to us beating Sri Lanka and Pakistan, but those matches, all four tests, were in South Africa, and the wickets were in our favor, and our fast bowlers did well. And we have some decent fast bowlers. It's a great pity that Heinrich Coetzee, who is the fastest bowler in the world, um, is injury prone, and it's doubtful whether he might ever come back again, which is a great pity because if he was able to spearhead our attack along with Rabada, I think and the support that we have in the fast bowling category, we would be all right. Now, it's very interesting that in this final we're playing at Lords. So, what sort of pitch are they going to come up with at Lords? The amazing thing is that Australia at the moment are, and this is one of the reasons I think why they had a fairly subdued Champions Trophy, is that they are missing Stark, Hazelwood, and their captain, Pat Cummins. Now, those are three top class players that haven't been playing. I would think that by June they'll be fit enough to come back. And the Australian side would be very, very difficult, I think, to beat um, under any circumstances, but particularly at Lords, if those fast bowlers come back into the equation. Um, and, hopefully we don't have any more injury problems. And if we have a decent fast bowlers pitch, as it were, I think we could give them a good match over 5 days at Lords. But it does worry me that we have limited top class spin, and if the wicket is such that it's is not entirely a fast bowler's pitch, although both sides, South Africa and Australia, I think would prefer a good fast wicket. Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Australia, too, have a tremendous batting lineup. They really do. And that is what saved them in this Champions Trophy. I mean, they had limited bowling facilities by comparison to what they normally have, but their batsmen came up trumps often. And led by Steve Smith. I mean, he's still going. He's like Kohli. He's just ageless almost. And so I think it could be a tremendous final, and I hope it is, to justify the fact that we have got there. And but South African Test cricket, I think, is, if we can just resolve these problems of not having some of our top players play for us consistently, we could be a very challenging test team.
I think, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. So definitely, the South African cricket board, as many of the other cricket boards around the world, are struggling economically to keep their players interested in playing international cricket for their country. But it's interesting, Mr. Quirk, as we head towards the finish of this interview. In the next, how do you see the next few years look for South African cricket, with especially the SA20 now embedding itself as an important tournament in the South African cricket summer? We've heard multiple interviews of Graeme Smith stating that how passionate he is for South African cricket, and the fact that SAT20 is something that is helping the South African Cricket Board earn money, but at the same time it could be detrimental to the South African national side, especially the test side. So how do you see the coexistence of SAT20 and the South African test team? Do you think that there could be a conflict somewhere down the line, or do you think that both can exist, and do you think that both existing is important for South African cricket?
Well, there's no doubt that the South African T20 tournament has saved South African cricket financially. And for marks to Graeme Smith, and I might say it's because of his wonderful contracts or contacts in India. I mean, all the 6 franchises here are named after Indian teams. You've got the Mumbai Indians, Cape Town, that actually won this last tournament, and all of them are related to a top IPL team. And that association that he's built up with India has been a lifesaver for South Africa. And of course, every year that we have it, more money will come into the coffers of Cricket South Africa. And hopefully, they will spend it wisely and not mismanage it. That is the hope. And if they do that, and they then can compensate some of our top players to play for their country instead of, in these things, as I was saying, that will be very important for South African cricket. And I still hope and think that there's a bright future for us. And I really hope that world cricket now, the ICC, realize that, we are a decent team, and that they will award us much better test match opportunities, and also that we will have the time to be able to continue with our T20. And I'm being quite critical about the fact that we didn't have these test matches against the top nations. But I do understand also that world cricket has become financial. It's all about money. And our players also, they chase the dollar, and I suppose you say, why shouldn't they? So, and in world cricket, there's no doubt about it that India, Australia, and England are the nations that bring in the money. I mean, you see in India the huge crowds. Australia, they get 80,000 people on Boxing Day at Melbourne. England, the first 3 days of any test match in England are sold out. Whereas here in South Africa, unfortunately, other than at Centurion and maybe at Newlands in Cape Town, test cricket is very poorly supported. And it's only in T20 cricket and maybe ODI cricket. And we've got, of course, we're hosting the World ODI Championships in 2027. And I think that will be a huge success because there will be big crowds. It'll be a fantastic success. Then there's also, of course, all this talk. And I heard it actually mentioned in the commentary today in the final of the Champions Trophy. What is the future of 50 over cricket? Now, to me, it would be an absolute tragedy if, for instance, the 2027 World Cup ODI series in South Africa is the end of ODI cricket, because maybe I'm a bit of a traditionalist and so on, but I believe in 50 overs, you can have a decent game of cricket. Whereas T20, yes, it's entertaining, but it's a bit of a slogfest, and it's all in favor of the batsman. Now, and the more and more of our young people are growing up with T20 cricket. And as a result of it, they're then not really interested in Test match cricket and even ODI cricket. And to me, that is a great tragedy. And I hope that ODI cricket doesn't die because you can have a proper game of cricket in 50 overs, not really in 20 overs.
Well, I think this debate on the future of ODI cricket is something so strong that we can have a different episode on that, Mr. Quirk, and love to have your time some other time on this. But thank you so much for your time today. We have discussed South African cricket in detail, and I hope that we'll have a cracker of a WTC final between two deserving teams. And yeah, I guess till I see you the next time, Mr. Quirk, I'd love to keep in touch with you.
Well, it's been a pleasure always talking to you, and I look forward to next time.
Thank you so much. And till the next time from the SNS Cricket Diaries, to all my viewers out there, take care. Bye.